Check. Testing 1, 2, 3.
Hey everybody.
We are live and on the air. Good evening from Victory Christian Church. I'm Zach.
I'm Evan. And now for your news.
We're glad you have joined us today.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Oh,
Hey everybody.
I got
We are
you.
live and on the air.
That's annoying.
As you can tell, this is a highly professional operation. Goodness gracious, guys. It's going to be a long night. But luckily, I have my trusty caffeine here to keep me company.
Yes.
Cheers.
Cheers.
So, welcome to our third parenting class, but this is actually part one of a brand new set that we're doing. This is another two-parter.
Mm-hmm.
Last time we did mental health. We talked about a lot of the things that your child maybe has already been facing and things that they may be facing in the future. We also talked about how your reaction to their concerns and to the things that they bring to you, and even the ways that you show them how you process emotion, all of those things can impact the mental health of your child. So if you haven't seen that yet, and that's a topic that sounds interesting to you, we'd encourage you to go back and check out some of our older posts. Also to check out Victory Students on YouTube, and check that out. It was a fun course.
Yeah, and that's on this channel here, so if you want to click that, you can subscribe. And you can scroll down on the page to see all that kind of stuff. I'm trying to I promise I'm not just like goofing off on my phone. I'm trying to open up the link in my app. I've got it in my browser, but then I can't comment to talk to you live.
You can use the text if you want. You just can't do it on your phone.
I guess that's true. We've got a comment bar here. So if you like to, say what's up or let us know that you're there or that you can hear us, then that's cool. Leave a comment. So, also, if another quick housekeeping thing, if you haven't subscribed to our parent emails, all that kind of stuff, that's on our website. So if you go to victorycc.life, you can go to students or you can go to kids. There's links on there that you can subscribe to parent emails, and those go out every week, and let you know what's happening in our areas of the church as it pertains to your kids or you in a situation like this, and just helps us communicate better with you and keep in touch.
Also, don't forget we got a ton of events coming up here at Victory. We have some events for adults, some events for our volunteers. Obviously, Easter is coming soon. We actually, on the same night, have an overnighter for young kids and an overnighter for our student ministry. All of that stuff is on our page, so make sure you go to myvictorycc.life and you sign up for that stuff. Just be aware April is a packed month, and our calendar's not going to ease up anytime soon because who needs sleep?
I heard there's something big happening the third weekend in April. Trying to remember what it is. You want to help me out here?
Kwanzaa.
Okay, yeah. Maybe that's not it though. I'm thinking something more like I'm thinking like eggs or bunnies.
Yeah, Rick Davis is going to kill you when he sees that, right?
this is what it's all about, right? No, just kidding. Easter is April 21st. We've got it's a packed weekend.
Yep. Our
normal service times are changed for that weekend, so we're gonna have a Saturday night service at 6:30, and also 3 Sunday morning services, one at 8 and 9:30, which kids and student stuff will be going on during that time, and on the Saturday night one. But there's also an 11 o'clock service that will have, it's nursery only, right?
Yes,
just like
nursery only at the third and final service on Sunday.
Yeah. So now that we've gotten all the housekeeping stuff out of the way, let's get to the point of why you're watching this. And that is, over the last 10 years, there's been this revolution where everybody seems to have one of these smartphones, as opposed to the dumb phones that just flipped open and, you had to pay like big money for 200 texts a month or something like that. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
And we would always, that was back when I was growing up, so I was always going over that, as it's like the equivalent of going over data nowadays, unless you have unlimited. But it's, the world has changed in the last 10 years, and lots of research has gone to support, and explain what some of those changes are in the minds of our youth, and all that kind of stuff. And so, as parents, it's left us with, what do we do with this? Not just with phones, but also with, most houses have Wi-Fi now, constant connection. So how do you manage, being a good parent and setting up good boundaries, but also protecting them from things that are potentially unsafe online? things they shouldn't be getting into, and people they shouldn't be talking to. How do you protect their information? All that kind of stuff. There's a lot to cover, so we're gonna actually. That's why we're doing 2 weeks on this. A similar version of this class we did during the second service back in August of 17, I think. Yeah, 2017. So we've updated some of the content for this, and yeah. So if you were there for that, some of this will be a little bit familiar, but I mean, it's so much information. That class ended up going over like by 20 or 30 minutes, so that's why we're splitting this up in 2.
Yeah.
And hopefully, cover more useful stuff for you guys, and we can engage with you through the comments and through questions that way.
Yeah,
so
for sure. And we are excited to have a dialogue with you guys here in the comments if you're watching live. But of course, if you're not, you can still feel free to share this event out. Still feel free to comment on it, because as Zach said, we're coming back again for part 2. So even if you missed out on it tonight, there's still another part that you can be part of live, and we'll look forward to sharing that with you guys. One thing I would say kind of going forward, as we've said in the past 2 sessions, we're not doing this because we are experts on any of this stuff. We're doing these things we're doing this class because we've researched a lot, we've gotten a lot of information from people who are experts on this stuff, and we want to help pass it along. Victory, as you know, is built around an idea that we're a community, that we're a group of people who are doing life together. And so our goal is to share that knowledge and help to hopefully inform you. So if ever we're sharing stuff and you're like, man, this is obvious, I would say bear in mind a couple things. First of all, not everybody is going to know all the stuff that we're going through, even if you're lucky enough to. And we hope that most of you know a lot of this information already. But even if it is, we hope that this would be a good kind of a good refresher, but also just a good way to help maybe connect some dots and help kind of paint a picture, maybe even from a younger perspective. Both of us are pretty young just in general, and we're also new to the parenting game as well. And so maybe providing kind of some perspective is something that hopefully that'll be helpful to you.
And it's also good just as a community, like going through this and refreshing ourselves on this information together helps us, really be a village more than anything else and take care of each other. And so I know when my kids get to be teenage and I'm gonna want the parents of the kids that they go hang out with to have similar boundaries as me. And so we just want to create that kind of environment and that kind of community where we can really look out for each other and continue the conversation together.
For sure.
So kind of as we dive into this is kind of a verse that we want to be kind of to shape the mentality of how be the filter of how we think through this, because we can too often filter the information and knowledge we have through our own experience. Sometimes that is flawed, and so sometimes our perspective needs to shift. And so we figure the best way to do that is to filter that through a godly perspective. And so from 1 Corinthians chapter 10, this is what Paul writes in verses 23 to 33. I'll kind of paraphrase some of it, but he says, "I have the right to do anything, you say, but not everything is beneficial. I have the right to do anything, but not everything is constructive. No one should seek their own good, but the good of others. Eat anything sold in the meat market without raising questions of conscience, for the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. If an unbeliever invites you to a meal and you want to go, eat whatever is put before you without raising questions of conscience." And he was saying this to some Jews who had strict dietary laws, and he's saying that don't be so picky, don't be rude. This is about something bigger than that, emphasizing the point that it's about others, not just yourself. You may have the right to do something or not to do something, but is that beneficial for everybody? This has been offered as sacrifice, not blah blah blah. I'm referring to the other person's content. Sorry, I want to get to the stuff.
Rick Davis is gonna love that part too.
Yeah. But if anyone says to you, no, I'm skipping that. Verse 29, "I am referring to the other person's conscience, not yours. For why is my freedom being judged by another's conscience? If I take part with thankfulness, why am I denounced? Because it's something I thank God for. So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. Don't cause anyone to stumble, whether Jews, Greeks, or the church of God. Even as I try to please everyone in every way, for I am not seeking my own good, but the good of many, so that many may be saved." So, especially as Americans, it's really emphasized, and we think about what my rights are.
Yeah.
And so sometimes we take that and we bring it into our Christian community. These are what my rights are. That's really legalistic, and it doesn't really actually help anybody when we think through things in that way. So like, this is helpful when it comes to kids and technology, because a lot of times they'll argue with you that like, hey, I have a right to privacy.
Yeah.
Right. And then sometimes it's in the Constitution. I have a right to privacy. And as parents, we're like, well, we don't want to invade their privacy.
Yeah.
But which is more valuable? Is it privacy or is it honesty and openness? And so you kind of, these mentalities need to shift in light of kind of that whole passage. Is it my phone versus my parents' phone? Is it my body versus my community? Yeah.
I think another thing too that's a good point of perspective on that, like this verse offers, that not everything is constructive. I mean, I have the right to eat pizza 5 times a day, every day, but is that good for me? Is that something that's going to help me to grow and be healthy and to live a long life? Absolutely not. And I mean, okay, now I know I'm not exactly a paragon of healthy living, so that's kind of a silly example for me to give maybe, but that's part of the perspective that we're taking as well, is that just because there are some things that they may argue I have a right, and you have to realize that your right as a parent to lead them outweighs that right. But also as well, there are certain things that it's good to guide our kids and say, you may have the right to do that, but that doesn't mean that it's good for you. That doesn't mean that it's something that's healthy for you to pursue.
Rather think about what is most beneficial. It's not just our own good, but the good of others. So when we talk in this class about some practical things that you can do, hopefully we're thinking about it in a way that's, not pinning you against your kids, like this is what I need to do as a parent, and kids, you should listen, because we all know how well that works. But rather use this information as a way to build bridges between you and your kids and open the line of communication rather than cut it off. So that can be a really tempting thing when it comes to this area, because when it comes to this area, we all kind of lose our minds. We're like, how do I handle this issue? How do I handle this issue? But what we found is it's easier to think about technology and to handle issues of technology the same way we would handle anything else.
Yeah.
Because here's the reality is none of us were raised right about it to know how to raise right about it. So.
Well, that's because it's so new.
It's so new. It's really a big social experiment right now.
Yeah.
In our society, so and all over the world. So, you and I, we had parents that taught us how to respect people, taught us how the ideas of and concepts of working and working hard at what you do, and being respectful of others. Those are all things that every kind of generation has had to pass down. But how to handle technology is something new for our generation. So as adults, we've been introduced to this technology with fully developed brains and a more mature way to respond to it and interact with it. But our kids don't have that. Yep. That's just not where they're at psychologically. Prefrontal cortex, they're just not there. They don't have the impulse control. They don't have the rational thinking, the longevity in thought and plan making.
Yep.
that just, if you remember and think back to when you were in middle school or younger, like tomorrow was a long way away.
Yeah.
And just thinking about getting to summer break this time of year is like, that's still, 2 months away. That's forever away. As adults, we see that a little bit differently. It's like, oh my goodness, it's only 2 months away. But they just don't have that, and so that changes the way they think about it. And I think we know that, but we forget it when it comes to this.
Yep.
Because what might be okay for us may not be beneficial for them.
Sure. And I know I can only speak for me personally, but there are certain things that my parents were very clear with me about saying this is a boundary that we don't cross, that we expect you not to cross, and things like that. And you probably could relate to that feeling of, oh no, I've done this I can't let mom and dad find out. And our goal for you, and our goal through this conversation is that you can open some doors to honest conversation with your kids, so that way there can be as few of those things as possible, because especially in this realm of technology, temptations, things that can cause struggles, and even going back to what we talked about last time, things that can cause mental health issues, all of those things can become taboo topics if we're not careful. And the only way that your kids are going to know right from wrong is if you allow that honest conversation to happen. And you have to be aware that some things in life that, things that your parents taught you are never going to change. Honesty is always going to be something that's going to be relevant. And things like, the way that we treat other people, that, I'm telling my kid, don't ever punch somebody. That's never going to go away. But technology is changing all the time. So there's really no way, even now, even being really well informed, there's no way that I can teach my kid everything that she's going to need to know about technology. So the only way she's going to succeed, and the only way that I'm going to be successful as a parent, is if I open that door for honest communication going forward. So that way, as things change, she always feels like I'm someone trustworthy that she can come to. That's the only way that we can stay ahead.
And ultimately, as parents, you want to have open and honest communication with your kids.
Yep.
And so the way that we handle technology is very much linked to our ability to have open and honest conversations with our kids, because along with the brain development that they're going through and all that kind of stuff, that one of the differences that happens between us as adults and as kids is just the way that they think. Like, we think of the technology as one side, one part of communication, but really doesn't have much to do with our real lives. Our kids are very much different. Like, technology is their number one place to communicate.
Yeah.
And so for instance, when we became adults and social media became a thing, and the ability to interact with people online, we were fully developed, and we were able to see that, and we as adults kind of see social media as an extension of our real lives. But as kids and teenagers, social media and online communication is actually primary, and everything else is an extension of their digital footprint.
Yeah.
Of how they are seen online. And so, because of that, that gives technology a little bit of a unique and different perspective and power in their lives than it does for us. And at the same time, though, because of the lack of impulse control and logistical thinking, they often don't make the connection that virtual actions carry real world consequences.
Sure. And why should they? Because half the time when they're online, they're using a fake username. They're not actually using their real name. They're playing a video game where they're inhabiting someone who's not them. It's a character. They're watching Netflix, and they have no interaction online. They're just somebody invisible. And so it makes sense why they struggle to make that connection. And that makes it important for us as parents to help our kids realize that their virtual actions are very much real world actions and impact their real world lives.
Yep. That goes from anything to kind of the texts and photos that are sent, to things that are said online, to an image that they put out of themselves online. That all that kind of, it's a different world for them when it's happening online. Yeah. And we even feel that to some degree as adults, but as kids and teenagers, they feel that quite a bit more than we do.
For sure.
So we talked a little bit last month in our classes about mental health, a little bit about this, so we're not going to get into too many details, and there's also links in our description with more resources about this kind of thing. But there's been lots of studies that link the amount of time that kids and students spend on screens, and there's lots of links to that, and depression and anxiety, mental health, just mental wellness. So you can check out some of those resources or refer back to last month's class on mental health. But those are things as well to keep in mind when it comes to all this stuff.
Yeah. The
comparison issue with social media for students is much more heightened than it is for us as adults, and that has some different implications for their lives as well. There's Asana O'Neill was this article came out a couple years ago, but she was at the time an 18-year-old social media star. She had, I think, about a million followers on Instagram.
Wow.
She was, huge in the social circle, so on Instagram. But this is a quote that she said. She said, "Social media, especially how I used it, isn't real. It's contrived images and edited clips ranked against each other. It's a system based on social approval, likes, validation, and views, and success in followers." Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that we have to realize as adults, especially when it comes to social media, is that the digital image that our kids are putting up is linked to all the other areas of their life. Think about the way that they receive affection from a coach, or from sometimes us as parents when it comes to grades, or what we want them to do and our expectations. It comes from teachers. It comes from anywhere in their life that they are given tasks in a certain area. They are seeking approval, and it is performance based. Mm-hmm. How well they do equals how well they perform equals how much validation and attention they get. Well, social media is an extension of that. Mm-hmm. And so the affirmation, the validation they feel as individuals, it goes up and down with the ebbs and flows of likes, dislikes, and comments on social media, if they even get any.
Yeah.
So this has a huge bearing on their perspective of themselves and of others, and so, but it's not going away.
No, not at all.
So social media and online and smartphones, they're not going away. So when we think about this, it's really easy to kind of become like fraidy cat parents, where we just want to take everything away and control everything. Mm-hmm. But it's not so much a problem to be solved, because it's not going away. It's more of a tension to be managed.
For sure.
So what we want to talk about is how to manage some of those tensions well and in a healthy way. And to protect them, but also, to give them some access and help them grow better. My parents have wrestled with this a lot because, my sister's 13, and they're wrestling. Do we get her a smartphone? We don't think she's mature enough to handle a smartphone because she's 13, and we don't want her on social media. But all her friends have them, and it's really hard to get her a phone that's not a smartphone anymore, because phone companies don't want you to do that, so they charge a lot, and so do we give her? My parents were even wrestling with that, so I know that that must mean a lot of people are as well.
Yeah. And
I've wrestled with that in my thinking, like, when Zeke gets of age, am I going to allow him to have one at a certain age? What age is that? And how do we make some of those decisions? It's our job as parents to help them manage this tension as well, because some of the things that we've talked about too is like, we want them to be able to be successful with technology, so we can't just say they're never going to get it.
Sure.
Right? So the typical student will be out of the house between 18 and 20 for college or work. So how do we get them to the point where they can handle it responsible by that age?
Yeah.
So it's age and maturity. As time goes on, they get more freedoms, and what we want, hopefully as parents, is by the time that they leave the nest, they are able to handle technology in a successful way.
Yep.
And so how do we set that up? What boundaries are okay at certain ages, and all that kind of stuff?
So, I think one thing that, to me, I've observed is that it's easy as a parent, or just as an adult in general, to treat technology as something that's different from the other roles of parenting, something that has its own unique set of rules. And maybe it does, to an extent, but I think one of the things that we want to really drive home tonight is the fact that you can apply pretty much the same parenting concepts to technology that you're applying to everything else. One of the things, just kind of a few examples that we've put out, is that there's no secrets in our home. This is a common thing that maybe rule that you have for your kids, or a value that you have set up for your family. No secrets in our home. Now, that would extend to maybe you don't close your bedroom door unless you're going to bed, or you don't, I don't know, whatever it may be. If you leave the house, you tell me where you're going. So if those are rules that you apply in other ways, why would that not apply to technology as well? Why would you not say, if there are no secrets in our home, I have access to all your social media accounts? Why is that different? I think, again, if you asked your kid, they would no doubt say what Zach said earlier. They would say, well, it's my right to privacy. But why does your kid not get privacy when they're in their bedroom? Why do they not get privacy when they're out with their boyfriend? The only time my kid has privacy is when she's sitting on the toilet, and half the time she leaves the door open anyway, and she asks me to come in and wipe her. So I know that's not going to last for much longer, thank goodness. But again, outside of being in the bathroom, your kids really don't need that privacy like they may imply. So again, I guess that would be my question to you. What's the difference? What's the difference? If you're going to say that they can't stay out past a certain time with their boyfriend or girlfriend, then why would they be allowed to be on their phone past a certain time at night?
With their boyfriend or girlfriend.
Exactly.
Because that happens through social media, it happens through Snapchat, it happens through text, it happens through FaceTime. There's so many different ways, as you know, that they can be with somebody without actually being with somebody, and temptations can still be there. My parents always said, and I feel like I heard this in youth group growing up as well, but nothing good ever happens after 10. Right? And I know that as true today as well, because while I'm watching my show in bed at night, I eat things I shouldn't eat after 10 o'clock. And so I know it's something that is a legit thing. It's something. And so as kids, I like that idea that, if no secrets is a value that you have in your home, then that extends to the technology realm as well. And so our kids want to sometimes compartmentalize that and say, hey, well, no, it's my phone, it's my technology. Well, actually, are you paying the bill?
Sure.
And as parents, I don't think I'm going to give my kids the option to pay for their bill if they have a job. Maybe they work their way to that point, but hopefully the answer is no. My 7th grader is not paying for their phone bill. I am, and so it's actually my phone. So you don't have a right to privacy to that. Also, you're in my house, my rules. Yep. We apply that concept to everything else, and that should apply to technology as well. I
mean, you could even be even more aggressive than that, because if you want to identify the most personal thing that nobody owns but me, probably your body would be the last line of defense. But I still tell my kid to wash her hands. I still tell my kid to take a bath. So even her body doesn't fully belong to her yet, because we help dictate those things. We decide what she can eat and what she can't. So it's good to have that honest conversation with your kid and tell them, well, no, you don't own you, nor do you own your stuff. And that even, I think a really good way that you can tie that back in is honestly just bringing it back to Scripture and talking about the fact that even now, just me making the point that my body belongs to me, even that's not true. Even as an adult, my body does not belong to me. I have a Creator who owns all of this stuff. Have those types of conversations to your kid and remind them this seems about as far apart from God as you can get, but all the stuff around us doesn't belong to us. And so at the end of the day, whether they're accountable to you or not, they're still accountable to Him. And
think about this. When we're talking about like the idea of like there's no secrets in our home as well, like that's not just a limitation of freedom on their part. That's also an obligation to protect as parents, as you know. Yeah. So like, but it's not just to protect them from what they might see, because to be honest, the internet's a wild place where people can see things without wanting to. You get pop-ups, or you get follow requests, or you get whatever. There's been studies done on the age that students are first exposed to pornography online, and it's 90% of the time it's accidental. Yep. They don't want to be exposed to that, but they're kind of eye-raped into it by like, so, and you've probably experienced that too, so the part of the protection is not just from keeping them from things you don't want them to see, although that's part of our job. It's to protect them from the burden of carrying secrets they don't want you to find out about.
Yeah.
And communicating that with them and having that open, honest relationship on your end as well is huge, to be able to say like, hey, this isn't just to protect it, because unfortunately we live in a messed up world, and you're probably going to see things that are not okay. And we're going to do the best that we can to protect you from that. And we hope that you start making good decisions to protect yourself from that as well. And you protect your thought life. But in the event that that happens, we don't want you to have to hide anything.
Absolutely.
We don't want you, even if, unfortunately, sexting is a big deal. Sometimes things get passed along, even if it's not a friend of theirs. It could be a friend of a friend that is passing along a message that was sent. And these things kind of go viral among student bodies, even in the middle school level, So to know and let your kids know, like, hey, this is for you as well. We don't want you to ever have to carry the burden of keeping something from us. That causes anxiety. It rips them up inside. It's so bad. And what you're doing is you're freeing them up to be able to have an open line of communication with you. Say, hey, I saw this today, or this was sent to me. I want you to know about it. Or if you as parents, if they know that there's no secrets, therefore we have your passwords, that we have access to your social media accounts, then we're going to check them periodically. We have a green light to what you see is what we see, and part of that is just for your protection, so that you don't ever have to feel like you have to keep something from us. And that's huge. That's an aspect that I think we don't think about very often when it comes to this.
I agree. And one of the things we want to do tonight is provide you guys a practical tool to be able to help with that. So Zach linked in the comments a smartphone agreement. One of the things that we hope for you is that the genie's not out of the bottle yet. We would hope that you're not in a scenario where your kid already has a smartphone. There's no restrictions. They're allowed to do whatever they want. Your kid already has access to whatever they want online. We hope that that's not where you're at right now, because it's a whole lot easier to give lots of freedom than it is to take away freedom. If you're not at that point yet, especially if your kid has not been given a smartphone, we would recommend that you check out this smartphone agreement, because your kid, when you come to your kid and you haven't established expectations from the start, when you come to them and you haven't told them from the very beginning that you're going to be watching their social media, reading their texts, things like that, if you access those things without having that conversation, they're going to feel betrayed. And to be honest, I get it. I understand why they would feel that way. You have the right to monitor that. But when you don't have that clear, honest expectation, the opposite of what we just said is true. You are now going to have to keep secrets from your kid in order to keep your relationship safe. You don't want them to keep secrets, and you don't want to keep secrets from them either. Trust us on that.
Because what happens if you find something that you now need to confront?
Yeah.
And they're like, whoa, hold up, you're looking through my stuff. Like, to communicate. We realize many of you may already be at the point where your kids have phones. Like, maybe you haven't had this conversation full. Be encouraged. Like, it's never too late to step back. And that's the whole thing about the open and honest thing. Is like, hey, as a parent, I wasn't raised right about this to raise right about this, and I'm still learning how to be a best parent for you. So I want to start over. I want to kind of back up. And this is not because of any lack of trust towards you at all. This has nothing to do with our level of trust for you. This has to do with my conviction as a parent to protect you and to take care of you and to lead you well when it comes to this. And so I'm sorry that I didn't set this up earlier, but this is something I want us to start doing from now on. And they may put up a fight about it. In fact, most teenagers would. But once you set up that new expectation and you have them sign that contract, that becomes the new norm. It's amazing how fast kids adapt, and it may be really a big struggle on the front end, but as time moves on, you're going to be glad that you made that call to backtrack and just be open and honest. Say, hey, I haven't done the best of this, and I want you to know, like, I'm going to do this because I have a moral obligation to God to take care of you and lead you well and to protect you. And so we're going to come into this agreement where I'm going to do a better job of helping you in this area. And you may not see it as help, but this is what I'm doing as the parent. This is what I've decided. And you can still always back up and start over.
And another thing that would be good to point out too, back when you did your class on this material a couple of years ago, Kurt Holcroft said something that I thought was really, really wise. He said, when I was a kid, and even probably even when we were kids, we were right on the edge, but when we were younger, the biggest thing that you were looking forward to was getting your license. It's, I want to be able to have my car, have my freedom, get my license. Now, that's not really a thing anymore. Not that your kid won't want to drive, but this is the thing that your kid is waiting for.
It's their rite of passage.
Yep, this is their rite of passage. They want to know, when can I get my cell phone? And you never have more leverage over that than, before they actually get this in their hand. Before, if you wanted to prevent your kids from doing something, you could hang that idea of you can't get your license until your grades are up or until you've shown maturity in this way or whatever. Now, this is the way to do that. And I'm not suggesting that because you should use it as a discipline tactic. I'm suggesting that because I want you to remember how important this is to your kid. So when you put this contract in front of them, they're going to push against it. I would be amazed if they didn't push against it. But I promise you, they will be willing to do whatever it takes to get this. Because again, as you said, it's a rite of passage.
Mm-hmm. And again, the goal is not to make it this way forever. The goal is, as they age and mature, they will gain more freedoms over time. So maybe by the time they're juniors in high school, you release the password to the App Store to them and allow them to make decisions on what apps to download and stuff like that. Because the goal, remember, is you want them to be able to handle this by the time they leave the nest. So I've heard this from several people. I heard it from Andy Stanley. My professors in college said this in developmental psychology and in pastoral counseling. I've heard this several times, but the idea that you want to start narrow as your kids are younger and then allow them to have more freedoms over time, and by the time they're a senior in high school, you have no rules for them. No curfew, no limits on technology, anything like that. Because if they're 18 as a senior, which most seniors are, then they don't even by law have a curfew. They can be out past 1. They can they're seen as an adult, and you want that safety net for them to be able to live with no rules while they're still in your house, to be able to catch them when they make mistakes. Because you don't want the very first time they get to live without rules to be when they're on their own in college or working and living in their own apartment or something. Because then all of a sudden they have all these new freedoms, and that tends to not bode well in the long term. So as a parent, the same applies to technology. You want to start narrow, but then as they get older, you do want to give them more freedoms and more ability to use their maturity in ways that will help them mature when it comes to their decision making and how to handle technology and all that kind of stuff.
Yep, I completely agree.
So kind of along the same lines, it's a lot of parents want to know, okay, so what age should I do this? At what age should I give this freedom? And the reality is there is no right answer. Only you know your kid. So it's not just age, it's age and maturity.
Yeah.
Everybody matures at a bit of a different level, and parents, you know your kids better than anybody else. So the law of our country is students can get their permit at 15 and drive with a parent with them, and then at 16 they can get their license, but they can't drive with anybody other than a family member besides one person for the first 6 months. Once they're 16 and a half, then they can have more people. So as by law, they even live by this concept. The older they get, the more that they mature, the law gives them some more freedoms. And the same is true in technology. As parents, at what age they can handle certain things. Some kids are not ready to drive at 15.
Yeah.
And you know that. And sometimes they're aware of that too. They're like, I don't really want to drive yet. Some kids aren't ready till they're 17. Some kids, like me, I was ready to drive at 10. I wanted to drive, So the minute I turned 15, I got my permit. The minute I turned 16, I got my license. All that kind of stuff. I made sure I had a job, because the rule in my house was I had to have a job where I could pay for my gas and insurance on my own before I was allowed to get my license. So I got a job at Chick-fil-A when I was 15 and made sure that when I turned 16 I could get my driver's license, and that's just where I was at. But your kids, so at what age should you allow them to be on social media? A lot of research will say It's not for the middle school mind.
Yep.
You know, and that the kind of the oxymoron of that is that as student ministries and stuff, we have Instagram accounts and stuff for that age group.
Yeah.
Because they're there. But between us and you as parents, don't let them be on there, because developmentally they are not ready for that. Mm-hmm. They're not ready for that kind of performance. They're not ready. Just read some articles. We're not going to go into all that. But it is not designed with the middle school mind in mind. In fact, that's why Instagram and Facebook say you have to be 13 to have an account. Mm-hmm. But even that is too young still, in my opinion. So. And
I think another perspective that I would toss out on that too is that there is a certain component of this where there's your kid's maturity, which is a huge part, mm-hmm. but then there's also the encompassing reality, where no matter how mature or how immature your kid is, they still exist in the same world, where they're going to be faced with the same pressures. So part of the conversation that I would have with my parents as I had gotten my license and was getting a little bit more proficient at driving, I would ask, hey, can I go to this place or can I do this? And sometimes my parents would say yes, sometimes they would say no. And when they would say no, sometimes I would push back, especially, for instance, the first winter that I had my license. I told them, hey, I really want to go do this thing, and they said, we're not going to let you do that. I said, guys, you've been with me, you know how I drive, you know I'm really careful, and my parents said to me, we know how you drive. We don't trust other drivers. You're a good driver. And they told me that. You're a good driver. We know that you're safe. But we don't trust the other people on the road because we don't know them. And I would say it's important for you to realize that even when your child is at a supreme level of maturity, even when you say, beyond a shadow of a doubt, I trust my kid not to do something wrong, remember what Zach pointed out at the beginning of this course, that things pop up online. Things that you're not looking for pop up online. People that you don't know are interacting with your kid online. And a good object lesson that you could use for your kids. My wife and I had this conversation earlier. I said, let's imagine that only 1% of the people online are bad people. And I'm making up a number there. This is not a statistic. This is just a food for thought. Let's imagine that 1% of the people online want to hurt you. The other 99% are great, really good people. In a game of Fortnite, you play with 100 people. So, in theory, every time your kid plays a game of Fortnite, they're playing with at least one person who's a bad person. Now, again, this is made up. This is an object lesson. This is food for thought. My point with that being, even if it's just 1%, the odds of them interacting with somebody who could potentially be harmful are much higher than we may realize. And it's good for your kids to realize, even though we trust you, we don't know the people that you're interacting with. Mm-hmm. We don't trust the other drivers on the road because we don't know who they are. So I would say, lean on your knowledge of your kid as far as their maturity and what they can handle. But bear in mind that your kid, even if they're extremely mature, may not be prepared to deal with the things that are put in front of them, and the things that they may not seek out themselves, but may be put in front of them without their knowledge, and they may not be prepared for the pressures and the temptations that come along with other people who want to entice them into doing things that are wrong, or who could potentially even want to manipulate them. And it's good to remind your kids, again, it's not that we don't trust you, it's that we have your best interest at heart, and that we want what's best for you.
Yep. I think your parents talked with my parents growing up. Because
they must have.
I feel like they said the same things to me. It's not about you, it's about everybody else.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that'll wrap up most of our content for today. We've got a ton more to share with you next week, especially when we get specifics into here's some tips you can use as parents. Today was we gave some of that, but it was mostly big pictures, kind of the filter through which to process some of this information, and when it comes to technology and monitoring it and protecting our kids and all that kind of stuff. But next week we've got a lot more to add to that, and we've got a lot more that we're going to dive into, and specific examples of things that have happened, that happen regularly, and as parents, by and large, that parents just aren't aware of. Mm-hmm. And how do we protect against that? Well, first of all, you got to be aware that it's happening. Second of all, you got to know where it's happening, and then we can talk about how you can protect your kids from it. And so, but I would say the major takeaways from today is just openness and honesty have to be the highest priority above any other rule you want to set with technology. Openness and honesty have to be a part of that. If your kids ask why, have an answer. As kids, they may not need that answer. As they get to be teenagers, the reason you have more conflict with teenagers is because they're starting to understand there is a why that I can understand and I can question now. I now have some knowledge because of that development that's happening that I feel like I could make that decision and it would be differently. So tell me why this is. And as parents, it's good to be able to supply the why and have that open communication, even if they don't like the why. You're not about protecting their feelings necessarily. It's okay if they hate you for a little bit, if it means you're protecting them, and you can be honest with them. At least they hate the honest truth and not the fact that you're being sneaky about anything.
Yeah.
So I would say that's the biggest takeaway from today. You don't want them to have any secrets. You don't want to have any secrets. You want an open and honest relationship in every area, including technology.
Absolutely. If you guys have any questions, stuff that you'd like to hear our thoughts on or anything like that, feel free to leave them in the comments or just shoot us an email if you want, and we can try to work those into our next class if you guys have questions or anything.
Yeah.
Sweet. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.
Go well.